I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hillstream gang or Angola 3. I'm here for life, I'm here to die. Inside these walls, inside the wire. And when the wolf cries, I know it's over. Oh, Bloody Angola. Oh, Bloody Angola.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. I'm Jim Chapman, and today I have got one hell of a story to tell you that took place in New Orleans, Louisiana, primarily between 1991 and 1996, and the crimes of who became known as the Storyville Slayer. And before we get into it, I want to give you a little history on why this part of New Orleans is called Storyville. So from 1897 to 1917, New Orleans established what was known as a centralized prostitution district, believe it or not, known as Storyville. It was named after the city alderman, Sidney Story, who sponsored the creation of the district, and Storyville is bordered by Iberville, Basin, St. Louis, and North Robertson Streets in New Orleans. So on July 22nd of 1991, a known prostitute in the Algiers area of New Orleans, a young black woman known only as Brenda, she goes into the police station and she reports an assault. She tells police that a man picked her up after having a short conversation with her. He strangled her to the point that she actually lost consciousness. Now, when she awoke, she was half naked under a pile of tires near Memorial Park Drive and Nevada Streets in New Orleans. She was able to give police a description which was used to create a composite sketch, and she described this man as a muscular, well-dressed, middle-aged black male who drove a dark-colored vehicle similar to a Buick Regal or a Monte Carlo. So police get this information, but honestly, not a whole lot is done at this point. It's New Orleans, and unfortunately, in the lifestyle that Brenda was living, these things happen more often than you may think. And to police, I'm sure it was one of hundreds of assaults going on at that particular time in New Orleans. Nothing really stood out about it. Then, on August 4th of 1991, just 12 days later, the body of a 17-year-old girl by the name of Danielle Britton is found in a ditch, and it wasn't far from where Brenda had been assaulted and strangled. Her body was covered with garbage, and an autopsy determined that the teen had been beaten and strangled to death. Just shortly before her murder, Britton had dropped out of school, and just shortly before her body was discovered, she was seen in a New Orleans bar next to an unknown man. And it's important to note there was nothing found in Danielle Britton's background that indicated she was involved in any kind of prostitution. So a little bit different than the first murder, but some similarities were surfacing between these two females. First, they were left obviously in very close proximity to each other. They were both strangled. They were both placed under piles of trash or tires in Brenda's case. And the crimes took place just 12 days apart. So we move on to September 3rd of 1991, about a month later, and 21-year-old Tyra Tossam was found strangled to death. Now, she had a criminal record for drug possession, and she was a mother of 3. Here again, more similarities, a high-risk lifestyle. The body was found in the same general area. The timing, less than a month from the Britton murder, and just over a month from the Brenda assault. And the method of killing was the same. So at this point, you would think police may realize they have a problem. But again, these are not ladies from a wealthy area of New Orleans. And sadly, the attention is just not the same. The sense of urgency is not there. Not from the media or the police by this time. Then, on November 21st of 1991, the body of 37-year-old Regina Ono is discovered. Also a mother of 3 with multiple prostitution arrests. Her autopsy was performed, and again, the cause of death was strangulation. It was also noted in the autopsy that just prior to the death, she had taken a large dose of cocaine. We move on, this time to December 14th of 1991, and skeletal remains are found in a ditch near a highway. Now, this is just 3 weeks after the body of Regina Ono is discovered. The autopsy established that the remains belonged to that of a 20-year-old young black girl who, at the time, was in her early 20s, and she was approximately 5 feet 1 inch tall. Now, despite having some characteristics that stood out, such as she had strongly protruding front teeth, she went unidentified. The victim is referred to as Jane Doe number 1 and presumably was strangled and just found a short distance from Danielle Britton's body. So let's talk about this for a second. In 6 months' time, you have 4 dead women and 1 who was nearly killed, all found in the same general area. MO as it relates to the manner of death, all the same, strangulation. So what are the police doing? And what was the public reaction like? Surely everyone has to be talking about this in the New Orleans area, right? Well, no, as a matter of fact. It's not really anything that anyone at this point is discussing. And this is really pre-internet. So while in today's world, Facebook would be absolutely lit up with all of these murders taking place, it seemed that no one was talking about this in the early 90s. And guess what? A new year didn't change much. On January 4th of 1992, the body of 29-year-old Lydia Madison is found in a ditch under a highway overpass. Lydia also had several convictions for drug-related charges, and like the other women, strangulation was deemed the cause of death. Then there was a little bit of a break, but on June 2nd of 1992, 25-year-old George Williams' body was found in the LaBranche wetlands area of St. Charles Parish. Now, again, the autopsy showed he had been strangled. Now, this would not have matched the killer's MO completely. George was a man, right? However, he was a transgender, and without going into too much detail on this, he looked like a female and had some female features. So it's likely that the Storyville Slayer, whoever it is, may not have realized this was a man. George also lived a very high-risk lifestyle. He had prior arrests for drugs and robbery and was employed as an exotic dancer at a New Orleans strip club. And the killer did not wait long to strike again. A month later, as a matter of fact, on July 25th of 1992, the body of Noah Filson is found in the waters of a canal near I-55. And in this case, there were a lot of commonalities to the death of George Williams the prior month. Noah was also a transgender and also worked at a New Orleans strip club under the name Brenda Bewitched. Then, 2 months later, on September 21st of 1992, the remains of 29-year-old Regretta Martin are discovered in the waters of yet another canal near a highway in the New Orleans area, this time in the town of Butte. Regretta was a mother of 3 who had previous arrests and, again, high-risk lifestyle with prostitution, and her autopsy showed her cause of death as a drug overdose. And incidentally, many of the victims that we've discussed so far had high levels of drugs in their system at the time of death. But yet again, many similarities in the way these victims were killed and in the manner in which these bodies were dumped. So here we are, nearing the end of 1992, and you have, at this point, 7 people dead and 1 nearly killed in the New Orleans area, all living similar lifestyles. And something at this point absolutely crazy happens. Remember the first victim that actually survived I told you about at the beginning, Brenda? Well, she actually runs into her attacker in a grocery store nearly 2 years after her attack. This was on October 24th of 1992. An article came out in the New Orleans paper, and here's the highlights from that article. It reads, an unidentified man believed to be a possible serial killer of at least 4 New Orleans women was spotted in Algiers recently by a woman who survived an attack. The young woman left for dead on July 22nd, 1991, known as Brenda, saw her attacker in a grocery store parking lot last week. When he saw that she recognized him, he fled, police said. Can you imagine that? And what are the chances? It goes on to read, Crime Stoppers announced rewards of up to $5,000 for the arrest and indictment of the alleged killer. Police said they are investigating whether the same man may have murdered yet another woman, Regretta Martin, who was found dead in St. Charles Parish. Her decomposed body was found September 21st, police said, of 1992. Decomposition has prevented authorities from determining how she died or if she was a victim of foul play. Assistant Police Superintendent Antoine Sachs said investigators are not sure if the deaths are related, but similarities include the ages of the women, their hangouts, the fact that their bodies were found dumped almost nude, and that the women were either strangled or suffocated. Police are circulating a composite sketch of the suspect, who is described as black, broad-shouldered, in his 30s, about 5 feet 8 inches tall. Police said he has been seen in an old model, brown Chevrolet Nova, or blue Buick Regal, or a green car. All of the victims have been poor black women with slim to medium builds in the New Orleans area, and some have frequented the same bars. 2 of the victims were found to have cocaine in their systems, and Sachs believes the suspect is targeting young women he believes to be either prostitutes, drug users, or both. Police did not provide any evidence to show that the victims were prostitutes or drug users, however. So that's how that article read. And at this point, you would think, okay, the police are on it, right? I mean, I guess they were. I guess they were doing what they could. But considering the body count here, to me, it just didn't seem to have a whole lot of a sense of urgency that you would think it would have. Yes, the composite sketches, they were being circulated, but this is still the early 90s. DNA was just starting to be understood, really in its infancy at this point, and police just didn't have a ton to go on. So a few months pass, and then on February 20th of 1993, the skeletal remains of 30-year-old Cheryl Lewis are discovered yet again in the waters of a canal, this time off a highway near Hanville, which is on the outskirts of New Orleans. Now, while investigating her death, police learned that she was seen alive on February 2nd of 1993. So just 3 weeks earlier, getting into the car of an unidentified white male. Cheryl's autopsy did not report a cause of death. Her body was very badly decomposed. It had been in a canal for nearly a month before she was found, but it was discovered that she was very drugged up with both cocaine and methamphetamine. Then, the very next day, on February 21st of 1993, the body of 42-year-old Dolores Mack was found in the waters off of a canal near a highway not far from where Cheryl Lewis was murdered. She had been strangled, and although she had no prior history of drugs, a large amount of cocaine was found in her system. Her body had only been in the water for 12 hours when she was found, and that's an important movement in this case, if you will. This tells me that this serial killer, by this point, he's doing what all serial killers do. He's getting cocky. He's getting very arrogant. Think of the arrogance it takes when just 24 hours prior, 12 hours, in fact, after an investigation is started into a body found in a neighboring canal is taking place, you dump another body close by. Guaranteed that serial killer knew that body had been found just 24 hours before. It was almost like he was laughing at the police by this time. This guy is begging for attention. So let's jump to February 4th of 1994. Two off-duty St. Charles Parish deputies, they stumble upon a guy on the same stretch of road where Cheryl Lewis' remains had been discovered. It was late at night. It was dark. And the car, which was a cab, just seemed suspicious. So the two off-duty policemen, they want to get a closer look, see what's going on. And they get out of their vehicle. They look inside of that cab, and they see a man sitting in the driver's seat masturbating. So the deputies, they get the driver, who was partially undressed, to exit the vehicle. The driver, he produces a valid Louisiana driver's license that identified him as Russell Elwood. And Elwood tells the deputies that he was there to change the oil and brakes in his car. And they said, well, can we search your car? He says, sure. The deputies search the car. However, they don't find motor oil. They don't find oil changing supplies. They don't find oil filters, all the things you need. And then he also said he was working on his brakes. They don't find brake pads. None of that in his vehicle. Obviously, he was lying. He also didn't contain any flashlight or anything like that he would have had to have to make those necessary repairs to his vehicle in an unlit area at night. So if you don't have a flashlight, you're not going to park in the pitch dark to do this work. That much is obvious. Now, I bring up this guy because this situation right here that I just mentioned is going to play a big part in the story later on. So for now, I want you to put this particular discovery in your back pocket, just kind of in the back of your mind somewhere. And we're going to go to February 5th of 1994, and we're going to go to St. John the Baptist Parish, another parish just on the outskirts of New Orleans, and the skeletal remains that were found and later determined to be that of a 25 to 35-year-old female who was determined to have been strangled to death. Unfortunately, due to decomposition, she was never identified, and she is listed as Jane Doe number 2. Then, on February 10th, just 5 days later of 1994, more skeletal remains are found, this time determined to be a 15-year-old girl. Again, however, due to extreme decomposition, she remained unidentified and is listed as Jane Doe number 3. 2 days later, on February 13th of 1994, the body of a 25-year-old by the name of Stephanie Murray is found in a small pond near the Bonacary Spillway in New Orleans. Then, 2 days after that, on February 15th of 1994, the skeletal remains of another young girl are found. Her identity was never ascertained, and she became known as Jane Doe number 4. So in February of 1994 alone, 4 more dead women are found. And to tell you how underreported and little known all of this was, in February of 1994, I was 19 years old, very in touch with the news, etc. And like most 19-year-olds at that time, I probably went to New Orleans with friends to party on Bourbon Street at least once a month and knew nothing about any of this, not one word of it. And also, incidentally, if you're keeping count, by this time, I have read you off 12 victims that died and 1 victim that barely lived. And no one is talking about it that I was aware of. But it didn't stop there. On April 2nd of 1994, 2 sets of skeletal remains are found in canals on the very same day, later determined as 1 set belonging to a young female and another set belonging to that of a young male. Now, due to the extreme composition from being left in those canals, neither could be identified, and they are referred to as Jane Doe number 5 and John Doe number 1. And let's talk about that for a second. As these deaths became more and more frequent, if you notice, the killer starts putting these victims in canals. Why do you think that is? Well, I would submit to you, just my opinion, that he's realizing they're struggling to identify these victims when they find them in canals. He's figured out the decomposition speeds up when they're in canals. And in a lot of cases, they were finding just bones. So obviously it's harder to find victims when you dump them in the middle of nowhere in the swamps of South Louisiana. But we'll move on. On July 3rd of 1994, the body of 32-year-old Michelle Foster was found after she was reported missing from New Orleans just a few days prior. And then on October 19th of 1994, the skeletal remains of yet another woman is found in a wooded area near a highway within the limits of Bridge City, Louisiana, which is just outside the New Orleans area. Those remains were later found to be that of 28-year-old Stephanie Lewis, who, unlike the prior victims, had no criminal record at all. So we're going to move forward a couple of months, and I'm going to bring you to December 9th of 1994. And I'm going to mention another name for you to keep in the back of your mind. And that is of NOPD officer Victor Gant. Now, on this day, a woman by the name of Sharon Robinson, who was Gant's girlfriend, she goes into the NOPD and she reports that Gant beat her. Now, remember, this is a police officer for that department. According to the statement, Gant punched her in the face and broke her nose. Now, Gant, of course, he denies this allegation, and he said he just pushed her during an argument and that she fell and hit her nose on a chair. But Gant had a problem because her children actually witnessed the entire thing, and they corroborated their mother's story in an interview with police. Even the ER doctor who treated Miss Robinson said that this type of break was a direct result of a beating and not her nose hitting a chair. In early 1995, because Gant was a police officer at NOPD, he has to go in front of a disciplinary committee on these accusations. And it's during that time that they scheduled testimony for later on in the year from several key witnesses, including Sharon Robinson. In the meantime, on January 22nd of 1995. The body of 29-year-old Wanda Ford is found in a swamp outside of New Orleans near I-55. Now, like nearly all of the murders so far that I've told you about, she had a lengthy criminal record and a long history of drug abuse. Then, the very next day, January 23rd of 1995, the body of 29-year-old Sandra Warner is found in St. John the Baptist Parish. 2 days later, on January 25th of 1995, the remains of Henry Calvin, who had gone missing months earlier in New Orleans, is found. Then, on March 24th of 1995, more skeletal remains are found under an overpass in Tangipahoa Parish, which is about 30 minutes from New Orleans. Those remains are identified as those of Linda de Benedetto. So the next few months are quiet until a major break occurs in this case. On April 30th of 1995, two local fishermen find the body of a woman in a swampy area off I-55, just 20 minutes from New Orleans. When officers arrive on the scene, they discover a footprint from a woman's training shoe next to the body, and they see a wad of chewing tobacco nearby. Rigor mortis, which typically occurs approximately 12 hours after death, was still in its early stages, and that told detectives the victim had not been in the area long. The lead detective stated, "At the time, we had no trace of who she was. We later found out that she was Karen Ivester, white female, 30 years of age, and the cause of death was asphyxia due to suffocation." You could see in the autopsy report they had made notes of some abrasions on her neck where she had been grabbed by someone and choked. But get ready for this. Roughly 3 hours after Ivester's body was found, detectives were notified another body had been discovered about a mile south of Ivester's. The body was face down in a shallow body of water next to an I-55 off-ramp. The victim, a 28-year-old woman, was fully dressed, which was kind of rare in these murder cases that were occurring in New Orleans at that time. Usually they were nude or partially nude, but this victim was fully dressed, clad in a uniform from Harrah's New Orleans Casino and Hotel, and she was wearing an ID badge that said her name was Sharon Robinson. That's right. The same Sharon Robinson that filed that abuse complaint against her then boyfriend, NOPD police officer Victor Gant, in 1994. Now, Robinson's cause of death was listed as a drowning, and police theorized her killer stood behind her and held her head underwater. And if you have any thoughts of the killings being coincidental, don't. Detectives discovered Robinson was wearing woman's training shoes with tread that matched that footprint I told you about next to Ivester's body, meaning Robinson was still alive and standing when Ivester was killed. And incidentally, Ivester and Robinson were good friends. So at this point, Gant, considering his history with Robinson, and especially considering she has yet to testify against him in that NOPD hearing, couple that with the fact that he not only personally knew Ivester, but according to family and friends' statements, had a personal grudge against Ivester. And well, Victor Gant has a major problem. So to give you a little more detail regarding these two killings and the manner in which they were killed, Karen Ivester's boyfriend, he had reported that he last saw Karen on April 29th at 10 o'clock p.m. when she was going to work in a booth. Now, Detective A. Wayne Schaefer, when he was asked about this, he stated the boyfriend nor anyone else investigating the case knew what kind of booth she was talking about specifically, only that she told her boyfriend, I can make $50 if I work the booth. Now, Karen's body was also found nude in that swampy canal, and an autopsy showed, as I told you, that the cause of death was suffocation due to asphyxia, strangulation. Notes of some of the abrasions around her neck indicated that she was grabbed and choked. And as I mentioned, that wad of chewing tobacco, and I keep bringing that up for a reason, it was found near her body. Now, in regards to Sharon Robinson, in her autopsy listed drowning as her death. And of course, police, they question Gant about this, and they request his DNA. And the hope was that chewing tobacco still had the DNA on it, and they can match that to Gant. That would place him at the actual scene where the bodies were found and subsequently make the case just about bulletproof. But again, this is 1995. DNA is not what it is today. And the processing of DNA, definitely not what it is today. Even working hours on end every single day, it could take many months to get a full profile and then match that to Gant. So on May 1st of 1995, after some 22 bodies are found and one nearly killed woman are discovered, the NOPD finally forms a task force to find and bring to justice what will become known as the Storyville Slayer. But the Storyville Slayer ain't done yet. Just 6 days after that task force is formed, on May 6th of 1995, the body of 39-year-old Sandra Williams is found on a boulevard in New Orleans. Cause of death? Strangulation. So they are still continuing to stack up. And if you think this story is unbelievable already, you ain't heard nothing yet. Next week, we wrap it up. So look for that. Thank you so much for listening and supporting. If you enjoy the podcast, please rate it wherever you listen, and check out the Patreon page, patreon.com/Bloody Angola podcast for commercial-free early release episodes and other benefits. And until next time, I'm Jim Chapman for Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. Peace.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hillstring gang,